We're looking at a leadership series on the mind of a champion. The mind of a champion, learning to think like a champion thinks. In this particular lesson, I'm going to discuss the subject of who's on first. Who's on first? Several years ago, there was a comedy routine that was done on this subject, who's on first. It was hilarious because of all the confusion that came by trying to define who's on first. Now, the problem for too many leaders and churches is we mistake activity for progress and think that busyness equals success. That's not true, friend. That is not true at all, because the truth is, if our activity is not taking us where we need to go, it's a waste of time. I think we could even state it stronger than that. There's nothing more tragic than seeing someone running hard in the wrong direction. Oh, because you're not only losing time, you're going to have to retrace your steps and come back to where you started to go the right way that you need to be going. And so just because you're busy does not mean that you are successful. Now, the thing I have seen among so many leaders is we frustrate our people, the people that are following us, the people that are listening, because we give them clear vision without giving them good strategy. We energize them. We get them all excited and emotional about playing the game without ever defining what game we are playing. And the rules of every game is completely different. Playing football is different than playing basketball. You've got to define the game and then develop the rules. See, before we start anything new, we should stop and consider, is this going to take us where we want to go or where we need to go? If it's not taking us the right direction, then why are we doing what we are doing? Just because we're doing something doesn't mean we're doing what we ought to be doing. No, we need to define that. Define it. Who's on first? Now let me give you 3 points to help us to understand what I'm going to say and to remember what I'm saying. Number 1, learn to think steps, not programs. What I see for too many churches is they have all kinds of programs going that are not connected to anything other than one location. Everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody's got their ministry going, but where is it going? Many of them are pulling the opposite directions. So learn to think in steps rather than thinking of programs. If the program doesn't fit in the step, then we probably ought to stop doing that. The problem for so many churches is they have reputations for doing ministry without the end in mind. Everybody's busy doing something, they're going somewhere, only God knows where sometimes, because they've not thought it through. They're not thinking. They're just simply busy with all their different activities. That's not good leadership. That is not good leadership. We need to begin with the end in view. As it is said concerning the will of God, that God planned his work and then he works his plan. Boy, that is so true. What an example for you and I to base our lives upon. Now, if we're going to help people determine who's on first, the first thing we got to determine is, where do we want our people to be? We know where they are, or we should, and we should understand what's happening in their life. Where do we want them to go? What is it that we want to accomplish in their life? That's the first thing that we have to determine. Then we have to determine the steps of how we will get them there. Many times it's a long process. something that may take years to accomplish. So you've got to break this down and think of steps. Steps. How are we going to get them where we want them to be, where they need to go? Let me use the analogy of a home. I think most of us can relate to this. The home setting, when you come to a home, there's the front door, which usually is attached to what we call the foyer. The foyer, and we need to think of church this way. We need to think of any activities that we are doing in these three steps. Number one, the foyer. The foyer is the place where the large event takes place. In other words, everyone is welcome. We're opening the door to whosoever will. Let them come. That's the big event. What we should do in designing this foyer event is we should think about the people that will be visiting for the first time. It's well said, there's never a second chance for a first impression. Boy, that is so true. So you've got to think in terms of this guest that is coming, the person that is coming for the first time. Our goal should be to make sure that every visitor walks away from that event feeling like guest. That's the key word. They must be treated royally. They must be embraced. They must be celebrated. We must make them feel welcome into our home or into our foyer, our great event. They are welcome as guests. Then the second area that we need to be thinking of steps is move them from the foyer, this large event, into what I'm going to call the living room. The living room. Now, the living room is a smaller audience than the foyer. The foyer, everybody is welcome to come. But in the living room, it's an environment where people can begin to interact with one another. They can network with one another. Whereas the foyer is a large event and you're looking at the back of people's heads and somebody up front is doing all the talking. In the living room, it changes. It's more of an environment of people sitting around the room and interaction, moving back and forth among them as different ones take their turn of speaking. This is where we get to know one another in a casual atmosphere. Everybody is more relaxed now because they're getting to know people personally. And getting to know them personally, they begin to feel like friends. That's the key word. The key word. Coming to the large event, they were a guest. Now they're beginning to become friends because they're getting to know people on a first name basis. So that's the living room. Then the third one we need to think about is what I'm going to call the kitchen table. The kitchen table. The kitchen table is a smaller, intimate group. It's a small group of 3 or 4 that's sitting around the table and they begin talking, interacting with one another in a very personal way. It's in this small group where we are comfortable enough to begin to talk about the things that are really important to us, something that may be troubling us, or something that has happened in our life that we just want to share with somebody that's close to us. Now, what's happening when we come to the kitchen table is, in this very small group, that's where we begin to act like family. Family. That's the key word. We have gone from being a guest to just being a friend to now we're in a covenant relationship with one another. We are committed to one another's success. We can talk about the secrets of our heart. We can talk about things we could never speak of in a large group because we are now with family. Now, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about we need to think steps rather than programs. Now, let me give you a second thought concerning who's on first. That is what I'm going to call building steps. This has to be in leadership. We have to develop this. First of all, you determine where you want them to go. Secondly, you begin to determine how you're going to get there. The first thing is, if we're going to build steps, is each step must be easy. It's got to be easy. Everybody's got to be able to do it. Because see, if the step is too difficult, they may be afraid to take it. And I think that's what happens so many times. We scare away a lot of people that are interested because they don't think they can do that. It seems too big. I remember many years ago a pastor talking to me as a young evangelist, and he gave me some wise counsel on preaching on faith. That was my favorite subject in those days, and I was always trying to motivate people to believe God. And he said this to me. He said, much preaching about faith only ends up condemning people rather than encouraging them. He went on to explain, when you talk about great faith, they sit there and think, I could never do that. And I believe he's absolutely right. So when we think about steps, we've got to make them easy, something that everybody can do. The second thing is, every step must be within everyone's grasp. Now, what I'm saying is very similar to what I made in point 1, and that is, if people are hesitating to take the step, maybe the step is too big. Maybe we need to scale it back and make it smaller so that they will feel comfortable. They will feel confident, I can do that. That's what we have to do in building these steps. Now, another thing that we need to do concerning steps is each step must be obvious. We've got to know, where are we going with this? What is going to take place? If the step is not obvious, then it's confusing. See, people like to be able to see where they're going. If they can't see where they're going, it creates anxiety, stress, fear. And they hesitate, they draw back because they're not sure about this. So make the step easy, make it something that's progressive, make it something that is a very obvious thing. This is the next thing that I need to do. Leaders must do this. They must consistently explain what's important and what's next. They're thinking in terms of steps, how we're going to get there. It says a pastor said to me one day when I was talking about a series of lessons that I was doing on, I believe, the Song of Solomon, and he was saying to me, does your mind think like that? He said, I can take the steps, I can take the lessons and teach them. I said, yes, that's the way I think. I simply think in the steps. I believe that is good leadership. All good leaders always are thinking ahead. What is the next step that we are to take, and why should we be taking it? It's this breakdown of communication, a lack of communication that hinders our progress. And what so many people, so many churches, because they've not defined the win, they don't know what game they are playing, it creates confusion. And for me, what I see, most churches resemble crowds rather than families. It's not a covenant group that's committed to this one thing I do. No, rather, it's just a group of people that come together to have a good time, to smile, to laugh, to enjoy the music, to, somebody to encourage them. They don't know why they're being encouraged, but it feels good. That is not good leadership. And it's a breakdown of communication. Now, let me talk about a third area here. The third area is what I'm going to call the advantages to building the steps. The advantages that come from this. The first thing is it develops a team player mentality. And by a team player, I'm thinking in terms, it's not just two people, like when it comes to the sport of boxing, you got two people in the ring fighting each other. No. And that becomes an us, me against you type thing. And that's not good for group leadership. No, we need to think of teams of people that come together and work together in unity to accomplish great things. This team mentality where we learn to depend on each other. Each team player contributes something valuable for the team. For instance, when you think of the basketball team, the great coach John Wooden said, anybody that puts the ball through the hoop has 10 hands. What did he mean by that? He means we're a team. There's 5 people on the floor playing the game. You're not going to win the game alone. You've got to become a team player. And so you've got the different people playing the different positions that make the team a winning team. The same is true with churches. You don't build great churches on one ministry. No, you have to develop a team effort where you have many people that are involved in the team effort. And I believe this is the number one reason that most churches are small, is because you have one person that is the leader, not leading a team. They're trying to do everything, to be everything to that congregation. And the truth is, we are all limited to 24 hours a day. We are all limited to a certain amount of energy. We are all limited to a certain amount of resources. It's only when we begin to think of becoming team players, working together, that we are going to be able to do great things to develop the mind of a champion. If we don't do this and develop this team mentality, then individuals tend to become very territorial with their, quote, ministry. And they begin to see themselves in competition with other members of the church. No, we're not in competition. This is where families break down. When everybody starts competing against each other. It's when marriages break down, when the husband is competing against the wife against the husband. You've got to think together as a team. We are working together, not in competition, but in completion. And I've seen so many churches where the different ministries are in competition with each other. They're competition for the resources. They're in competition for the people. They're in competition for time on the schedule. That is never going to develop a championship team. It's only when we learn to work together. Another advantage that comes from building steps is it begins to reveal the things that are not working or are not working very well. See, because as I said in the previous lesson, that misalignment usually happens gradually. We don't even realize we're getting off track. We don't even realize that we're missing the goal. Oh, we got a lot of activity that's going on, but we're not moving toward the goal line. If we're thinking in steps rather than programs, then we catch that more quickly. We begin to realize this used to work very well. It's not working well now. So here's the changes that we need to make that ministry effective again. See, it's the steps that we're taking that keeps the main thing the main thing. If we're not careful, it's the old cliche, the tail starts wagging the dog. And if we're not careful, what started out, and every ministry is this way, every organization is this way. Organization tends to take on a life of its own. And this is where you have so much bureaucracy in government, is you've got all these big programs that are no longer effective, no longer working, but we can't do anything about it. I was talking to a gentleman that is working for a small town, and he said, we're going bankrupt because what used to work is not working anymore. He said, for instance, we have 2 vans in this city that are there provided for the different activities of transporting people from place to place. We got 2 vans, but we've got 15 15 drivers. I said, why have you got 15 drivers for 2 vans? And he said, because they just keep adding more drivers and they never replace anyone. No one is ever taken off the payroll. And he said, the payroll is killing us. Now, this is what I'm describing here. Because they're not thinking of steps, of progress, they're just thinking of themselves, thinking of what I'm getting out of this. You don't build winning teams that way. The way you build winning teams is everybody is working together for the common good of the team. Keep the main thing the main thing. The nature of every organization is to move from simplicity to complexity. Now, let me repeat that again, because that is one of the most important things I've discovered in life. As a leader, one of our main jobs is to keep things simple, to be able to define it in simple terms that everybody can understand. I was just a teenage boy, but I still remember my dad and I were together one day, and someone was talking about a great teacher. This great teacher that, he is, and they use the word deep. He's so deep that most people don't even know what he's talking about. We left there, my dad turned to me and he said, son, don't you ever believe that. He said, the truth is nobody was deeper than Jesus. And yet Jesus could make it so simple that even a child could understand what he was talking about. He said, now that other man that they're calling deep, he said, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's right. He's right. The simplicity is the profundity. What makes it profound is we're able to make it simple enough that everybody can understand what we're talking about. A very good book that was written just a few years ago is called Simple Church. Simple Church. And this is the message of that book, is learning how to simplify things, because life has a tendency to become more and more complex until we forget what's the main thing, what is really important. And we get so caught up in so many ideas and so many programs that we get away from the simplicity of life. Now, this is a natural occurrence. As churches grow, they naturally lose focus and they become more complex. That's just the nature of organization. As it grows, it becomes more and more complex. Good leadership knows how to bring that back into focus again. Realizes how to make it where everybody can understand. The wise man in the book of Ecclesiastes 7:29 says, truly this only I have found, that God made man upright, or he made him sincere. But they have sought out many schemes. Now what's he saying? The same thing I was talking about. Life has a tendency to become more and more complex as we go through it. And so if we're not careful, we get away from the simple ideas, the simple reason. Why did we start this business? Why are we doing church? What is the purpose that is behind it? We've got to be able to define it. Now, this is the reason I do a lot of work in Latin America, and it's the reason that cell churches have grown so rapidly. It's the reason behind it is really very simple, and that is this. They do one thing, but they do it very well. Do one thing, and when you're able to take life and you're able to simplify it, bring it down into focus, do one thing and do it well. I give you the picture there of the Olympic athletes that have won the gold medals. They don't win the gold medals in every sport. No, nobody can do that. They focus on one type of sport, whatever they're good. Swimming, running, if they're working together, playing as a team, Whatever it is that they excel in that one sport, that one area. That's what we must do in our churches. By emphasizing steps rather than programs, we help the church to stay focused. We keep the complexity out, keep it simple, so everybody understands what's the next step. Where are we going? Emphasizing this helps to keep us focused. A lack of focus, it's not seeing the game clearly. It's having blurred vision. And we're never going to accomplish excellence if we do that. We have to focus on this one thing I do. There's a good cliche that illustrates this. It says, a swamp is just a river that couldn't make up its mind where it wanted to go. Now that's a good illustration. A swamp is just a river that couldn't make up its mind where it wanted to go. Many years ago, God convicted me with the scripture where Paul says, this is in Philippians 3:13, this one thing I do. And what God showed me was I was trying to do two things at that point. I was trying to pastor a very good church, plus I was trying to train leaders. And that scripture convicted me and forced me to make the decision. I chose to follow my heart, my passion, that is training leaders. And when I was able to say, this one thing I do, I was able to answer the question of, who's on first? Who's on first? Suddenly I knew the game that I was playing. And the things that I've been able to accomplish in life, I attribute back to that one simple decision. This one thing I do. I challenge you, define your life in those terms, and you'll develop the mind of a champion.